Allô, Nissan? Hey, grosse tempête, hein?
Hey, Karine, oui, je sais, les vilains bonhommes de neige sont de retour.
Mais avec le Nissan Rogue à traction intégrale, c'est pas stressant.
Exact, il est conçu et testé pour nos hivers. Oh, Karine, il y a un bonhomme dans le Rogue.
Ah, c'est correct. J'ai allumé les sièges chauffants.
Ah, bien joué, Karine. Maîtrisez toutes les conditions. Louez le Rogue S 2026 à partir de 0,4% jusqu'à 36 mois, incluant une réduction fidélité de 0,5% pour les clients Nissan admissibles. Jusqu'au 2 mars, sur approbation de crédit, les conditions s'appliquent. Détails chez Nissan.
But I think we have to make sure that we protect our language and our values. And in our values, I include secularism and equality between men and women. When I see in a school that some teachers, they say that the girls cannot have sport, I have big trouble with that.
That was the Premier of Quebec, François Legault, a couple of Fridays ago, delivering, some would say a very strong message, taking aim at Islamism in the province and defending Quebec's values, of course. He was asked about recent incidents in Quebec schools, and he even proposed, perhaps, a ban on public prayer. Let's bring Yasmine Mohammed into the conversation, human rights activist and the author of Unveiled, How the West Empowers Radical Muslims. Yasmine, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Elias.
This is a discussion that we are now having a lot in liberal Western nations. Quebec, while not a country, is no exception to that debate, especially with how we view secularism and laïcité. What are your thoughts on how François Legault has been handling this, and even the notion of banning public prayer?
Yeah, I think Legault is absolutely on the right track. He's recognizing the need to defend secularism, as he noted, which is very important, obviously, but he also noted how important it is to defend this equality between men and women. And when we see these public prayers happening, what we're seeing there is a direct attack on both of those things. So I recently was speaking about how there's, you mentioned Islamists. There's a major difference between your regular average Muslim who prays in their home, who prays in their mosque. In fact, there are sayings from the Prophet Mohammed where he says that people should not pray on the roads. You should not be annoying people that are trying to get through their business on a daily basis. But Islamists or extremists are choosing to disregard those sayings of the Prophet, and they are choosing to pray in intersections, to pray in the middle of the streets, to pray in places where they are bothering people, and more importantly than that, where they are signaling to people that this is a show of force, that we look at our large numbers and look how we will take over your secular spaces and turn them into sacred spaces. Because it's important to understand that when you have these prayers, when you as a society are actively participating, putting up barriers, making space for them to have these prayers, what you're doing at that point is you're empowering them to say men and women should be separated. Women who are menstruating cannot come here. You are participating in that sexism, and you're turning your secular spaces into sacred spaces that are only allowed to have Muslim people who have gone through the cleaning process that they need to go through before they can go pray, and certain women are not allowed, et cetera, et cetera. So we are actively participating in that, which is obviously incredibly dangerous for any society that values secularism.
But what do you say to someone, because since Premier Legault's comments, boy, there have been the legal experts, the constitutional experts saying you can't do this. Even the Catholic Church came out and made a statement and said, no, you cannot ban public prayer. People are like, there's nothing, it's just prayer. It's between you and your God. Of course you should be able to do it in public. What do you say to that? Because we have heard those voices in the last couple of weeks. What do you say to them?
Well, see, this is why, in Arabic, they call it a sim fil asal. So it's the poison in the honey. This is the game that these Islamists play. It's the game that they played in Egypt, in Syria, in Gaza, in Iraq, all over. This is what they do. They use the terminology, or they use the secular laws. They will use the progressive ways of thinking as ways for them to bring in their ideology. There's a very big difference between people who are just praying because they want to pray to their God. You could be standing there praying, nobody would know it, right? You could be sitting at a bus stop, doing a little silent prayer. There's a very big difference between people just praying in public spaces in a manner like that, and this basic proselytizing show of force that Islamists are doing. I mean, you can turn a blind eye to it, or you can pretend to equate it to other things as much as you want, but that is to your own detriment. I mean, we don't see, when we have Easter processions, or the Pope visiting, or things like that, we don't exclude other citizens from those public spaces. We don't say, well, there's Christians praying here, so we can't have any Muslims or Jews entering this area. We can't have any women who are on their period entering this area. Do you know what I mean? Like, we are doing things differently. We are allowing and empowering, and we're just, accepting a lot more when it comes from what people perceive as a Muslim background. But what they don't understand, and what is very, very important for them to understand, is we are not talking about average religious people here. Your average religious Muslim. And I encourage everyone listening to this right now to ask your average Muslim that they know at work or at school or whatever, do you go out in the middle of intersections and pray? No, that's not what they do. They do that because they are part of an Islamist ideology, and it is a genuine show of force. And people need to recognize the difference between a regular Muslim and a political Muslim who is hell-bent on this idea of passing Islam as a religion when they see it as a political ideology.
Let me ask you about some of the political discourse we've seen since François Legault made those comments, right? And Legault, he used the word Islamist. He did not say Muslim at all. But then the federal immigration minister, Mark Miller, shot back, said that François Legault is throwing all Muslims under this. Premier responded to those. Many people in Quebec responded to that back and forth. And I know I find it difficult on air when I'm going to discuss this issue, whether it's what happened at Bedford School or the other high school in Laval. It's tough because, I don't want to be perceived that I'm going after a religion. I want everyone to actually follow their faith, do it in their home, do it in whatever house of worship. And I feel that pressure. I'm like, I do not want to be perceived. This is a very serious issue, but I don't want to be perceived that way. What do you make of the political back and forth where you've got very high level politicians like Mark Miller almost defending what we see in the streets?
And those are the people that I call useful idiots. Now, most Canadians are like you, Elias. They don't want to be infringing on people's freedom of religion. Of course not. But the fact that we are like that is exactly what they are using against us. Because the fact that there are people like Mark Miller who are ignorant on the difference between a Muslim and an Islamist, essentially it's the difference between a Christian and a Christian nationalist. I don't know how to, there's no equal way for me to equate it for you. But I mean, take a look at the Middle East. This is not new information. This has been happening throughout the Middle East for 100 years. There's a reason why groups like the Muslim Brotherhood are considered terrorist organizations and banned in countries like Egypt and Saudi Arabia, yet they are free in Canada and America and the UK and Australia to assert their power as much as they want, because over here in the West, we are ignorant as to who they are. And so they pretend that they are just your average everyday Muslims. And if you say anything about us trying to infringe into your public spaces, that makes you a bigot, right? And so it's this gaslighting that forces people to stay quiet as they continue to do their ideological warfare.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important for us to be educated and for us to understand the difference between a Muslim and an Islamist.
Yeah, and it's trying to force people to not acknowledge what we're seeing with our eyes, right? And that's so dangerous long term. You know, Yasmine, we could always talk for an hour, as is radio, limited time. Text messages from our listeners once again. So happy that you're back with us. Thanks, Yasmine, for coming on.
Take care, Elias.
Yasmine Mohammed, human rights activist. Go check out her podcast, the Yasmine Mohammed Podcast.